Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is home ownership consultant Ross Kay from the wealthyhomeowner.ca. Welcome back to the show, Ross.
Thanks for having me back, Jim.
Is it true Canada is offering new immigrants free homes if they agree to set down roots outside the major cities?
Yes, that's true. And it sounds like somebody was reading one of my tweets somewhere. So that is 100% true, Jim. Now, this opportunity is also available to Canadian citizens. So it's not just to the new immigrants. It's not to the new asylum seekers that we have located in the city of Toronto right now, taking up housing spots for Canadian citizens. It's open to them there, too. If they get refugee status, become citizens of Canada, the Canadian government, under the structure of our homeownership situation we have in Canada today, if you're willing to move outside of the Greater Toronto Area in the province of Ontario, the government, the federal government, the taxpayers of Canada will pay for and fully pay off a single detached home that in the vast majority of the world is the best quality of home you would ever consider owning in your lifetime. That is simply the truth. So we have the child benefit free home program, free homeowner strategy. This is how it works. In the province of Ontario, over the last year, the Ontario government decided that they were going to give people under the age of 26, I believe, 25 or 26, free medication, pharmacare, free. That means as a parent with a child, you do not have to pay for pharmacare, drugs, when your kid gets sick. You do not have to budget for your kid. You do not have to plan for your kid. In this country, we already give taxpayer-supported health care, where if you get sick, you can go to a doctor, the hospital, without ever having to write a check. You don't have to carry health insurance. The taxpayers of Canada pay for health care for all Canadians. Whether you're a brand new Canadian, I guess in some instances we are now paying for people who are not even Canadian. That said, you don't have to budget for health care at all. Now, if you're a parent with two small children, or you have one children that's 8 months old, and you decide you're going to have another one, so you're going to have two young children, the government of Canada, if you are a minimum wage earner, will give you enough money that in a large percentage of the province of Ontario, over 50% of the province, so we're talking prime residential neighborhoods with virtually zero crime, all the sports you want for your kids, fantastic schools, everything else, the child benefit will cover your 100% of your mortgage payment and your property tax. So, for less than the cost of your hydro and your cable and your internet and maybe some natural gas, that's all it's going to cost you. You can live with your family, and the government, via the child benefit, will pay off that house by the time your kids go off to university. Now it gets better than that, Jim. Because in Canada, when you are a person of that income level, the government will do everything in its power to allow your children to go to post-secondary education and for the government to pay as little as possible. It is highly probable that 15 years from now, people in that income level will get their children will not have to pay for post-secondary. But right now, they can either pay a little bit for it, or they can go ahead and get a student loan, which once they get a job, they can worry about paying at that time. All of this is going on while this young couple with 2 kids, or these new immigrants with 2 kids, or these refugees who become new Canadian citizens with 2 kids, are living in a house that the government, the taxpayers of Ontario, the taxpayers of Canada, are paying off for them. It's actually what it is right now when we look at it, Jim. Like when we look at it, you have to look at all this whining and complaining about affordability is rooted in myth. Because those complaining about affordability do not understand the life cost that goes into living in this country, into an individual country, an individual municipality, for any family. Canada, it offers an astounding opportunity. I am going to say, now I'm not proficient in every single housing market, every single tax system, every single social benefits program of every country in the world. But of all the major countries, Jim, only Canada welcomes new asylum seekers, gives them Canadian citizenship, gives them health care, gives them free pharmacare for their kids, gives them a home that they will own without ever spending a penny out of their own pocket, cover their property taxes, and the amount of disposable income that those families would have, if they're prudent, means that their RESPs, Registered Education Savings Plans, would be fully funded for their kids, or their TFSAs, tax-free savings accounts, for both the husband and wife, would be fully topped up every single year over the next 17 years. So by the time they get their house is theirs, free and clear, they own it, free and clear, courtesy of the Canadian taxpayer, their TFSAs are fully funded. This happens raising 2 kids in a safe community where you don't have to worry about anything, with one spouse working a full-time minimum wage job and the other spouse only working a 50% of the week minimum wage job. You find me some other country in the world where the rest of the taxpayers in that society welcome new people to their country with the great benefits that are available to asylum seekers in the province of Ontario today.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after the break.
Arctic Star Exploration, operated by a team of proven mine finders, is focused on diamonds in Finland and the Northwest Territories of Canada. Work programs are underway in Finland and planned for Canada this summer. Arctic Star trades on the TSX Venture Exchange symbol ADD, on Frankfurt symbol 82A1, and the OTCQB symbol AESDZF. Please visit our website arcticstar.ca or call us at 604-689-1799.
Cypress Development Corp's flagship lithium project is located just east of Albemarle's Silver Peak mine in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. A 12-hole exploration drill program for lithium-enriched claystone on Cypress's 100% controlled properties is now underway. Cypress Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange symbol CYP, the Pink's CYDVF, and on Frankfurt's C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Ross Kay. Ross, you've mentioned several times that the price correction you recorded in the fall of 2016 for Vancouver really did happen, and that it has remained hidden. We're now hearing about falling prices in the detached market that mirror your warning of 2016. Why has it taken so long for others to begin to believe what you told us all about 2 years ago accurately?
The reason why it takes so long, Jim, is because it's like a magician. You're looking at one thing when really something else is going on behind the scenes that the magician doesn't want you to see. And this is the same thing with housing stats released by Organized Real Estate, and with the message that the stakeholders in the real estate community, realtors, bankers, mortgage brokers, builders, all want the Canadian consumer to believe in. They need you to believe that the market is better than it is because they have so little confidence in themselves or so little confidence in the home ownership market because they don't understand how the home ownership market works. So instead, they go to magician tricks. So your listeners are going to be really surprised with this when I explain it to them. The housing market in Vancouver and the housing market in Toronto are two totally different housing markets. The income levels of the people in Vancouver and the residents of the city of Toronto are two totally different income levels. The GTA has municipal land transfer tax in the city of Toronto. They have Ontario land transfer tax for every place outside of Toronto, including the rest of the parts of the GTA. In Vancouver, you have the foreign buyer tax that was added. You have vacant home tax that was added. You had the $37,000 boost for first-time buyers, which is now removed from your market. You have year after year after year of totally different markets. The housing stock in Toronto is totally different than the housing stock in Vancouver. The home ownership rate in Toronto is totally different than the home ownership rate in Vancouver. The income tax profile in the province of Ontario is totally different than the income tax profile in the city of Vancouver. Yet, all of those differences don't matter. Greater Vancouver, from peak till today, the housing market was 50% busier at its peak than it is in June of 2018. The city of Toronto was exactly the same, 50% busier at its peak than it is in June of today. Even though the Vancouver market had to go through that entire year and 4 months of the $37,000 boost for first-time buyers working its way through the market, even though you had all of the fears of the foreign buyers, fears of capital, fears of this, fears of that, same thing started to happen in Toronto. You have two new parties now in power in both places. Far different sets of rules for owning. The fact of the matter is, both markets were 50% busier. They were selling 50% more homes were traded at the peak of the market than what they're trading in June of 2018. Why? It's because, as we've said on your show, your listeners need to understand this. The reason why we can time the market, the reason why I'm arrogant enough to come on this show and tell first-time buyers when they should buy a house, how they should buy a house, when they should not buy a house, how they should not buy a house, or high net worth professionals who are looking to purchase $3, $4, $5 million homes in the most expensive parts of Greater Toronto or Greater Vancouver. The reason why I am arrogant enough to say to them, don't buy now, buy tomorrow, or buy now, you should have bought yesterday, is because all housing markets in Canada function in the exact same way. There is no avoiding how these markets change. What you heard in the newspaper last week in the Toronto real estate market and the Vancouver real estate market was not true. You read real estate stats released to benefit sellers. If you looked at the underlying data released by the real estate board, so this data is, we don't use this data, okay, so we don't use it. We get a version of it, but we get our own version. We don't rely on little mistakes the real estate boards make. I'll get into that in a second. But if you took the real estate data that was released by the real estate boards in Greater Vancouver or Greater Toronto, and you knew how to read that data, if you actually knew the hundreds of different rules and regulations that impact that data in those two different markets, you have enough information to make an informed decision. If you just look at the stats, you would have heard in Toronto that home sales were up year over year in June versus last year. Both real numbers and seasonally adjusted numbers were up. What I will tell your listeners is, even if I restricted myself, if my firm restricts, if I only give the team TREB data, they can take that TREB data and interpret what it means. So in other words, you can never ever compare June of one year against June of another. It is with the raw data the real estate boards release. So you can't use their stats, and you cannot use their raw data, because you have to adjust their data for how the real estate agents in that local real estate board practice their businesses. That means how the days of the month line up with the business practices of the real estate agent dictate what adjustments you have to use to each month's data. If you don't make those changes, then you can't read it. It's useless. It's no good. It's why every housing analyst in Canada can't read the data. They pretend that they can, but then on the flip side, they don't say they can time the market. We are arrogant enough to say we can time the market. Not only can we time it, if we're wrong, you'll never pay us. There is no confusion here. The real estate agents that we hire for our members, if they make a mistake, all of the commission goes back. Why do we not have to worry about that? Because this is how precise housing markets are. How can you get how can the housing market in both Toronto and Vancouver have been 50% greater, trading 50% more homes than what they were in June of 2018? Because that's how the market works, Tim. When we're looking at the data, we take June's data. Then, depending on the real estate board that it's coming from, there are 69 in Canada, we collect 253 different sets of real estate data each month. We interpret that data through our own adjustment, and then we aggregate it together. That means some of the sales that were reported in June of 2018, we won't count till July. Some of the sales that were reported in May 2018 will count in June. The same rules don't apply in the city of Toronto as they do in the city of Burlington, where I live. The same rules do not apply to the Toronto Real Estate Board that apply to the Greater Vancouver Real Estate Board, or the Fraser Valley Real Estate Board, or the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver. Your economists at the real estate board have no idea what I'm talking about. They truly believe, you can look at June 2017 and compare it against June 2018 and compare it against June 2017. And I will tell you, hogwash, you can't. Because I know what adjustments I have to make to the data in order to be able to use it in a single month comparison. We don't, generally speaking, Jim, even look at single month comparisons, because even with all of our skill and knowledge in adjusting those numbers, there still is a slight possibility some real estate boards are not giving us the data. There's a mistake. This happened when Comfrey joined Organized Real Estate back in 2013. There was a huge variance in the data for about a year and a half. And it took a tremendous amount of work to adjust it to be able to look at year-over-year comparison. The reason why your listeners, has the real estate board in Jim, here's a question for you. Has the real estate board in Greater Vancouver ever told the residents of Vancouver, home buyers, that sales in Greater Vancouver started to increase in the fall of 2013 because private for sales were being posted on the Greater Vancouver Real Estate Board?
Of course not.
You've never heard that.
No.
Okay? You didn't hear, the people in Calgary didn't hear that when the oil price dropped in 2014, and they were all of the home buyers were misled because the Calgary Real Estate Board refused to tell the public that their stats were being skewed because of the Comfrey, for sale by owner company, who had set down their business model in the city of Calgary. In the city in Ontario, Comfrey joined the Toronto Real Estate Board. They're posting all of their listings through the Toronto Real Estate Board. Why? Because that real estate board is the cheapest real estate board in Canada for a brokerage to run their business out of. So unless you know all of these things and you're adjusting for them, you can't comment on single month sales or even bi-monthly sales. You can't do it. It's why they think you can't time the market. Now when we look at the market in the city of Toronto for this month, it's even a bigger mess up. At least in Vancouver, anyone with a computer can go to the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver's website, and they can see that in all three categories of homes that the Real Estate Board in Greater Vancouver publishes selling prices for, the housing prices, the prices dropped in all three categories. Now, it's only a little tiny drop. But they also can look at those charts and see how the wavy lines, which are that magician's trick I told you about before, because those wavy lines really don't exist. What those wavy lines are actually measuring is the sales mix, how the sales mix changes from month to month. And if you have studied a housing market for 3 decades, you understand exactly how those sales mixes impact selling prices and fool the consumer. At least in Vancouver, you can go and look at that chart. In Toronto, it's more work. There's more work to be done.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after this.
I'm Greg Johnston, CEO of Carl Data Solutions, an industrial Internet of Things company that provides big data solutions for monitoring critical infrastructure. Carl Data offers machine learning and predictive analytics features through our cloud-based applications to deliver key asset-saving operational insights from massive amounts of data. Carl Data trades on the CSE symbol CRL and the pink symbol CDTAF. For more details on Carl Data, please visit carlsolutions.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Ross Kay. Ross, last week the Real Estate Board of Toronto issued a press release and claimed the market posted a year-over-year gain in sales and house prices. Is that how you read the data that you use to measure the market?
Goes right back to our earlier segment there, Jim. So, no, that is not how we read the data. when we're reading the data and we adjust it for what it needs to be adjusted to tell us, so we know the true story of what's going on with the market. We know that some of May sales were pushed forward into June, meaning May's sales numbers for the Greater Toronto Real Estate Board were actually lower than what they really should have been. There are some sales that should have been taken from June and thrown back in May. And then all of a sudden, that wiggly line that you see, we talked about earlier about prices, well, there's a wiggly line that you see about sales too. That wiggly line disappears when you make the adjustment. It's almost pristine in the path that it follows. You also have to take into consideration that the Real Estate Board of Greater Toronto knocked off about 100 sales from last year's number. I think it was about 80 some sales. They knocked the sales down. So they took the June of 2017 number that they published last year, and they adjusted it down when they're comparing it against June of 2018 numbers. They have done this for over a decade. It is there in the footnotes if you read it. It's there if you know what you're looking at. But unless you go to that detailed of amount of research, you wouldn't understand that they knocked 100 sales off last year's number. And they did that so that they could try to claim a 2.4% gain. So, let's say you don't knock off the 100 sales, because the difference is only, 200. There are 200 and not even 200 sales more did they claim June of 2018 versus June of 2017. Not even 200 sales more. They're bragging about a 200 sale increase. Well, of course, they knocked off 100, so really the increase is 100. I can tell your listeners today that far more May sales were processed in June than the 100 sale difference we just talked about. I can also tell your listeners that there were July sales that in 2017 would have been reported in July. In June of 2018, get reported in June in the Greater Toronto area. There is a similar variance in the data that happens in the Greater Vancouver. The rules are a little bit different, so the degree of variation changes. When we make that adjustment, we know that sales are down about 4% year over year. And of course, we're comparing that against an already collapsing market from June of 2017. Because as our members know, Ontario housing market was already correcting in the spring of 2016, a year before those 30% house price gains were being announced in the real estate board. The market was already rolling over. It takes years before the public is aware of it. And by that time, the public's forgotten about it. As people in Vancouver have already forgotten about the fall of 2016. They've totally forgotten about that. Even though the $37,000 boost was the only thing that was the difference. Even though Toronto and Vancouver were both 50% busier at their peaks than they were of June of this year. So, you take that into consideration, sales were down. Then there's this silly little thing called the category of homes. Now, it's not really the category of homes. It's a category of buyers. Where are the buyers buying? What category of buyers are out there? Is the market being dominated by first-time buyers, which will cause your average selling price to be lower? Or is it being dominated by wealthy, high net worth people buying their final super luxury home? And that will make the average selling price skew higher. That's when you see these EKG charts from the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver, which is published there. That's exactly what that chart is showing you. Now, you have to know how to read the categories of buyers. You have to know the type of homes that they're buying. And then you have to be able to measure that in a year-over-year comparison. And then you also have to understand that it doesn't follow the identical pattern every year. It can be as much as 8 weeks out for the same comparison of buyer type. And all that complicated explanation, it shows up in the Toronto Real Estate Board charts, where we see single detached homes in June of 2018 accounted for an extra 1.1% of their sales. In other words, for every 1,000 sales that took place in 2018, TREB counted an extra 11 single detached. So even though single detached prices have dropped another 20,000, and we're just talking about the average purchase price, another big discussion don't have time for here. 11 extra single detached houses were counted in every 1,000 sales that took place in June of 2018. Since the average purchase price between the 2 years only went up, what are we looking at? $16,000. I would say that those 11 extra sales out of 1,000 probably made up all $11,000. Oh, and then the single detached, they picked up about another 4 out of 1,000. And those condo apartments, they dropped. They didn't, of every 1,000 in 2017, they counted 297 of them. And every 1,000 this year, they only counted 276. That's the lowest price point category of home. So in an apples-to-apples comparison, average selling price should have been lower. It wasn't, because the buyers moved the market. Different categories of buyers buy at different times, affecting the selling price. There's an effect called the sales chain, which is how all housing markets function. So, the Real Estate Board released their stats, which were true. Housing market analysts across Canada over the last few days, since it was released last week, have all analyzed that, but they have no idea what I'm talking about. They have no idea about the adjustments that you need to make that work. Now, this includes, Jim, RE/MAX, Royal LePage, Century 21, Brookfield, TD Bank, National Bank, Bank of Nova Scotia, CIBC, University of British Columbia, University of Western, University of Toronto. All economists in Canada have no idea what I just told you, yet they can go to the charts and see exactly what I just said explained. But you didn't read anywhere that the only reason that the sales were up was because they were counting things they didn't count last year. Prices are up because the buyer mix changed. It shifted about 3 weeks in how it works. And people are going to believe the market stabilized. Home buyers are going to believe now's the opportunity to get out and buy your house. Well, I'm going to give everybody a warning right now, Jim. In 1989, interest rates increased about 3%. They went from 11.75% to 14.75%, and the housing market collapsed. It collapsed because approximately about 14% of the buyer's ability to pay was removed from the market. This year, interest rates have risen about what? I think it's somewhere around 0.75%. Effectively, in other words, the discounted mortgage rate that you could get from the low of the market, November of 2016 till today, it has gone up about 0.75 point. That 0.75 point is about 14%. Exactly the same. The housing market in 1989, 2018, the declined, exactly the same. The number of sales have declined, percentage-wise, exactly the same, when you adjust the data for how it needs to be read. What happened to the Canadian economy, Jim, in the 1990s was a recession. The housing market always leads the economy. The housing market led the economy in the Great Recession. The housing market is leading the economy right now. Your GDP numbers, your household consumption numbers, your car sales, your Home Depot sales, the amount of money spent on renovation, your mortgage financing details, the amount of mortgage credit lent, is already determined almost a year ago. The numbers you're reading now, we were reading a year ago in the market. It takes that long for them to show up. If people are going to be making a home buying decision using data and market intelligence that is a year old, you are caught. You are being fooled. You can check everything we said in the show today. You can go check those charts. You can try to process what I've explained. I understand you can't do it all. I understand this is something that doesn't appear in a textbook. These are simple facts. The only proof you need to hear is the Vancouver and Toronto real estate market, two totally different universes when it comes to home ownership, were 50% higher at their peak than they were June 2018. That was expected. That is what we forecast, because the inputs that make the housing market function dictate how the market is going to run. And that's what you see released in the press today.
Russ, before we go, can you give us a quick update on Quebec and Alberta, because we don't chat about them a lot?
So Alberta has been undergoing a house price correction now since about the second month of 2015. They don't know what's going on because they continue to use the Calgary Real Estate Board average selling price, which is not a selling price. It's actually the average buyer price, the average buyer ability to pay, what the buyers are buying. But if you were to track the new homes market, which is an easy way for a regular consumer to get an idea of what's going on, you can't use the StatsCan new home price index. It's a flawed methodology. But if you track their closing prices on the new single detached homes, for the sake of the argument, you'll see how much more people are getting for so much less in the city of Calgary. The decline in the new home market always takes a long time to be shown up in the resale market because of that quality differential. The quality differential raises way quicker in the resale market than it does in the new homes market. In Montreal, like in Quebec, it is a different thing again, because the home ownership rate is so low in Montreal, in Quebec. So when your home ownership rate is low, it means demand pressure on the resale housing stock is not the same. So in our business, we use a word called churn, which in today's world, churn, they use it for startups, for internet startups. And churn means a bad thing in today's term. So when they use churn today, they say, well, if we got 10 new customers and we lost 8, we churned over 8 clients. So in other words, it's only a +2. It wasn't really +10, it was only a +2 because we lost 8 customers. Churn in the real estate business decades ago, and for those experienced in the market since that period of time, was the reason why house prices gain. The more churn you have, the more houses are turned over, the more rapidly they're being turned over, the higher the house price gains are. It's actually illusion, but it's higher the house prices appear to be going. People believe these myths, and they believe that that's what's going on. In Montreal, you can't get that churn because the home ownership rate is so low. In Montreal, you also have a different taxation system in terms of the true cost, home ownership cost, or housing affordability. It is nothing like the Royal Bank, who gives you this housing affordability chart for like 30 municipalities across Canada using the same metrics. You can't compare home ownership affordability in Quebec to Toronto or to Vancouver or to Calgary or to Halifax. They are not comparable in any way, which is why I personally believe Royal Bank should be charged by the OSFI for publishing false information with that housing affordability chart. It's been out for decades. It used to be not bad when things were a level playing field across the country, but they have changed so radically over the last 15 years that affordability is just a joke. So your Montreal housing market, they are going to claim that it's still accelerating, housing prices are still increasing. You're going to hear foreign buyers are now moving to Montreal, and that's why the housing stock is getting purchased there. It's all BS, Jim. It's all nonsense. The housing market in Montreal simply has not peaked yet. It's going to peak the same way that Vancouver and Toronto does, the same way that every housing market in Canada does. Once the peak is reached, normally there's a period of contraction, and in some instances, very rarely, you get a correction. We are right now in a correction stage of the housing market, and the consequences for the rest of the country are going to be monumental. And all of those shills and hucksters out there who are pretending to talk about the housing market for their own personal gain, they're all going to be proven wrong in the same way that they didn't know peak Toronto, peak Vancouver was 50% this year than it was June 2018.
Ross, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
Our guest has been home ownership consultant Ross Kay from thewealthyhomeowner.ca. You're listening to HowStreet.com Radio. Our popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at HowStreet. Questions for the show or for our guests like Ross can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com Radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com Radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.